Hello, welcome back to this week's episode of Closed by Mo. My name is Mohammed. I'm hopefully your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate. I'm also a real estate investor and a broker based out of New York. This week's video, we're going to talk a little bit more about why the highest offer is usually not the best offer in all cases, because I feel like a lot of times first-time buyers especially have the misconception that regardless of how the rest of the offer structure is sort of played out or laid out in terms of the offer terms, as long as they give the highest offer number, they think that sellers will automatically jump on that specific thing, which we know is definitely not the case. So let's talk a little bit more about why that is and what the seller psychology behind the offer number actually looks like. Now, I want to begin by saying that obviously offer price is important in any kind of offer. You can't expect to submit an offer that's 50% below asking, especially if the market comparables justify that asking price, and expect that your offer is going to get accepted just because you made it all in cash. That's not how it works, right? Unless maybe the seller is very confused or the seller's agent isn't doing such a great job. However, even though the offer price is important, the offer terms are also definitely equally, if not more important, because the devil is in the details. Now, here's what I mean. Take a look at this example. Let's say you have a house that's listed at $200,000 and that's the asking price that you have it offered, and you got all these 4 different offers. Now you can see that there's a variation in terms of overall offer number as well as the overall valuation of the different contingencies, the amount of pre-approvals that the different buyers will have, as well as things like the earnest money deposit and how much money they actually have in terms of overall proof of funds in their bank account. The 2 key factors to keep in mind with any kind of situation where you're going up against multiple competitive offers or where you're going up against a house that's presented well, you have to understand the seller's psychology or what's going on in the seller's mind. And that's where your buyer's agent, if you're using me or anyone else, will sort of come into play, because my responsibility is to help figure out exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And that is what is important to the seller. Most sellers will have 2 big priorities. Number 1 is obviously the walkaway dollars. How much money are they going to be walking away with? Because just like everyone else, they want to be able to get the most money possible with the least amount of time that they absolutely need, or the least amount of commitment that they would absolutely need. The second thing is which of these offers has the highest likelihood to close, right? It's one thing to make an offer that's $50,000 above asking and have like a 3.5% down payment. It's another thing to make an offer at $20,000 below asking, but having an all cash available offer ready that you can close within 7 days or 30 days, no contingencies attached, nothing like that. As the seller, you have to figure out what's more important to you, and as the buyer or the buyer's agent, you have to be able to figure out what's actually valuable to the seller at that point in time. What are they trying to accomplish? And this is where having a good relationship with the listing agent or figuring out with the listing agent through the negotiation process what can and can't work. So a couple of these contingencies that you could sort of play around with when it comes to the offer terms are things like, an offer up escalation clause. Basically, if you make an offer at a very competitive price, you put a clause in there that if the seller's agent can verify that there's a more competitive offer and they're able to send that info over, of course, redacting all the personal info, that you'll be able to match whatever the second highest offer is or the highest offer is by a certain amount of dollars, whether it's increasing your value by 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is. Other contingencies or things that come into play are things like earnest money deposit, which is the amount of funds that you put at contract signing. This is something that will eventually be applied to your down payment and to your closing costs when it comes to the closing table. However, upfront, it needs to be put into escrow when you're signing the contract, and this shows the seller that you're serious. So let's take a look at all these offers again, and you can see exactly which ones are giving a very low earnest money deposit and which ones are giving a little bit of a higher earnest money deposit. In the back of your mind as a seller, you're looking at all of these, you're likely going to think that the person that's giving the highest contract signing amount or the highest earnest money deposit is also the person that is the most serious, because they're the person that stands to lose the most if there's any issues with the contract that doesn't fall under their contingencies or protections, because that means that the earnest money deposit can be kept by the seller if the buyer were to back out or change their mind for whatever reason. Other factors that also come into place as well as like your pre-approval amount. How high of a pre-approval do you have? And like, let's say for example, your asking price is $200,000 and the pre-approval comes in right at $200,000, but you have another offer with a pre-approval of $300,000, right? These might be the exact same thing. It might be underwritten the exact same way. It could be the exact same credit approvals or the exact same buyer profiles for both pre-approvals. psychologically as the seller, you're going to think that the person who can get approved for a higher amount or has a higher pre-approval amount is going to be a safer bet or has a higher likelihood to close because the bank is already willing to give them more money, but they're just not willing to take it because obviously they're within that comfortable threshold for their pre-approval in terms of the overall offer price as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing to also verify is, of course, the proof of funds. The more money you can show in your bank account, the better, right? At the end of the day, because that gives the seller a peace of mind that they have money or the buyer has money in the bank account to be able to justify their closing costs, their down payment amount. They're not going to be scrambling towards the end to wait for a few paychecks to hit to be able to close or foresee any issues with the bank having any issues with them not being liquid enough in their accounts to be able to justify that closing. Other things that also come into place, of course, is flexibility in terms of overall closing. If you're the seller and you, let's say, have a family, you want to wait until the end of the school year possibly, or maybe be able to buy your new house right before the school year starts. That's something that you as the buyer can be able to put on the table in terms of overall negotiation, in terms of saying, hey, you know what, I can be flexible because I don't have a house to sell, so I can just buy this house at your timeline, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So you tell us what you need and we'll be flexible with that. Do you need 90 days extra after closing to live in the house? Do you need to close by a specific date? Let's work together to figure those things out. Those are some of the things that will also come into play when you're making the offer, and you as the buyer's agent and the listing agent have to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And of course, the ultimate story is always true. Cash is most of the time king, but not always. I mean, take a look at the offer in terms of giving something that's $50,000 below asking, even though if it's all cash, that might not be something that the seller is prioritizing, right? They might not have an urgency to sell. They know in the back of their mind that, hey, this property hit the market less than 30 days ago. I've already gotten a bunch of offers. Why would I take an all cash offer just because it's giving me a quick closing, even though it's like $50,000 below what I'm wanting? For the seller, the priority may be to get the highest amount in that scenario, but there's also sellers that will say, you know what, if I can take this and I can be done with this project and it doesn't affect me moving to someplace else, that might be something that they're willing to do. The reason I make a video like this is so you as a buyer can understand that there's making offers is multifaceted. It's not just the offer price that's most important. Yes, it's crucial, but it's not the end all be all. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I'll catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.